thank you very much, Dan, for the introduction. So I work with a company called Esprida. I'm very excited about the Internet of Things marketplace. It's something that's become very popular and being used in lots of new applications, particularly as it becomes more available to consumers. So what I wanted to talk about today was demystify a little bit about how this technology works, what happens in the real world in terms of what types of advantages these sorts of companies are able to experience, and provide you some numbers around what they do. And then lastly, just give you a bit of an idea around how to get started, like what these companies do at the beginning, when they start out, or at different stages through their deployment. Okay. So first, I'll start a little bit about what Esprida does. So Esprida is a M2M, a machine-to-machine, or Internet of Things software platform. So we have a software that runs on each endpoint machine. It runs on each thing, and it calls back to a central sort of cloud-based application services. And you have the ability to centrally control and manage each machine and each endpoint. So when we talk with customers, the first thing that they're looking for often has to do with having the machines that they run or they operate, having them run either more efficiently in terms of if they break down, to fix them remotely, or to have a first-time fix rate. So a lot of times our customers are looking at having a first-time fix rate improved by 16%, or having the number of problems solved remotely up by 30% compared to a traditional on-site technical visit of some kind. The other area that a lot of our customers are asking for is about creating new revenue streams. So with now that they already have these machines that they operate or that they sell to their customers, what are the additional services they can provide, or how can they deliver a premium service model or increase availability and get more throughput through the machine and that kind of thing. So that's what we do. I wanted to provide I'll provide case studies about what this actually means in practice. So first, what I wanted to provide was just talk about a retail example. So we've been working with Kodak and their photo machine. So everything that Kodak puts in a retail store, when we started talking with them in 2003, they were completely disconnected. So they had 80,000 machines. This was the largest network of non-ATM machines, the largest fleet in the world, and they were completely disconnected at that time. So at that time, they had a large footprint, growing annually by 10,000 plus additional units per year. They had a 1-800 number for support. So if a machine broke, you'd call support and ask for help, assistance, etc. And they had a field service force of over 3,500 who would go into each, who would service these machines to upgrades, updates, replacements, etc. Right? And they had a bunch of challenges. So in the early 2000s, the challenges that they had is, the biggest challenge they had was people would mark the machines as out of order. So whether something small is wrong, like it's not powered on, or it's out of paper, or there's something more technical wrong with it, they just mark it out of order, and also not necessarily tell anyone. So what that meant was, one is it was a big hit in terms of revenue, because people can no longer purchase Kodak product. It was one impact, but the other impact was Kodak didn't know about it. So that avoided a clerk avoiding getting a customer complaint, but it didn't really help to fix the problem. And since they're all disconnected, this was a major problem. This was a major problem overall across their fleet. The second sort of major area they had as a concern had to do with software updates. So in the 90s, they would do software updates once a year or twice a year, and then retailers started asking them to do, pricing updates every month, promotional updates, etc. And the overhead they had for a disconnected system was they were physically mailing CDs and call the store and say, "Hey, look, did you install the CD?" So that generated a lot of overhead for them. And then the third problem they had was about gathering the customer data. So if you say, hey, look, what's the usage of the fleet? What are the products and features and combination that customers are using? In 2003, that was somebody visiting each location and gathering this data. And it took up to 4 months just to gather the data and process it. So the solution we provided for them is we have, they white labeled our solution as Kodak Remote Business Manager. They installed a software on each machine in each retail store. So each machine is now able to detect its operating parameters, so whether it's working or not, whether it has a problem. It's able to proactively fix those problems. So it can automatically fix those problems and also notify someone, so that if there's a problem, then at least someone centrally is notified and they can remotely connect to the machine or fix it remotely. They also have the ability to update software remotely, so now they can have 17,000 machines wake up on a Monday and download all their content, so it's all instantaneous and immediate. And lastly, we have the other capability that was very important for them was the data gathering. So now, rather than manually gathering the data, they're getting data every, twice a day. They're able to post the data. So now getting usage trending. Retailers are asking about, okay, if I sell different products in different combinations, how well are people using it? They're able to get that data immediately, essentially. And if you look at the impact of the business, so through proactive monitoring and gathering, sending this data back and forth, what they're able to accomplish is the availability of the machines went up. So more customers could use the machines because they were operational for longer periods of time. So their sales went up 11%. And their operational costs, because they could do so much of their capabilities remotely, their operational costs fell by 22%. So it's a huge savings for them in the retail space and in the operations of this fleet. I mean, right now they're up to 50,000 devices connected. Everything that Kodak puts in a retail store in North America and Europe essentially has our software loaded in there for remote connectivity and remote management. Okay. The next example I wanted to go over is in the banking space. So we work with a company called BBVA. They're one of the largest Spanish banks, and they offer a check scanning service. So they purchase, I guess, on their own dime. They purchase and sell or give their business customers a check scanner, so that customers can, or businesses can process checks from their office instead of going into the bank. The challenge that they had was there was two key challenges. One of them was regulatory compliance. So the FFIEC in the States had concerns about knowing where the transactions were coming from, because there's now a digital transaction, and they have a lot of customers on both the, say, American and Mexican side of the border. If a transaction was coming in through Mexico, that was now classified as a different type of transaction and had to be considered for fraud and other types of regulatory concerns around those types of transactions. So they had these regulatory things around knowing where the customers were coming from, and also had additional requirements for knowing your customer. A program to say which customers are working, are they actually where they are, is my data up to date? The other challenge they had with these machines was, again, around service. So these machines, once they were deployed and they were out there, they might get returns and say, okay, look, this one needs to be replaced, there's something wrong with it, I don't know how to use it, etc. So with our system, again, they implemented our system as an additional agent that ran with the check scanner. And again, so each machine is calling home saying, this is my location. And we're able to cross-reference where the check scanner is located versus where it's expected to be, and through that system they're able to flag the two and say, okay, this customer is in the wrong state, this customer is, say, in Mexico, for example, and then that's now flagged as a fraudulent customer. The other aspect of it is once it gets enough use, they're able to proactively implement like a maintenance program. So if you use the machine long enough, an alert comes up and says, okay, please run a maintenance routine or a cleaning card through the system. And as a result of these two things, they're able to drop their return rate by 70%. So what they call no problem found, where they receive a return but there's nothing wrong with the hardware, they were able to drop that through a remote diagnostic and remote maintenance program by 70%. And they also achieved this compliance for fraud that was specific to the banking space. Okay. The next example I wanted to touch on is in the advertising industry. So Titan 360 is a digital advertising company. They run an outdoor network. So if you think about the TTC, here we have ads, say, above the subway platform. They also have ads between the trains. And these are high volume, high impact machines. They run at 10 times the power of your regular TV. So they're very high, they're very bright machines. They also consume 10 times more power, and they generate 10 times more heat. And they're sensitive when they overheat. They're sensitive if there's dust, or if a vent gets clogged. They basically shut down. And the advertising revenue in these cases are significant. Okay, so what we did for this client is we built in a monitoring system to connect to the sensors behind the system. So there's over 40 sensors that we connect with for temperature, humidity, vibrations, etc. And we're able to tell whether those machines are running or not. This was a big impact for them because for them to service the machines, they could only be serviced after 2 a.m. after the train service was closed, and they had to go through a union team of 2 to 4 people depending on what it was and how high it was raised and whether electricians were involved, etc. So it was very expensive just to see if the machine's functioning okay or working all right. So through this system, they were able to generate, right off the bat, they were able to reduce the number of truck rolls by 20%. Because they could remotely check if the machines were working without sending a crew on site to look at them. In addition, they had advertisers were asking them about the reliability of the system, saying, okay, look, we're paying so many dollars for this ad network. Prove to me that the device is working at that time. And this provided a proof of play service or proof of performance service to make sure that the equipment was working at the same time that they're delivering the service. So it provides a more robust view that they were asking for, and they're able to expand their advertising revenue by 12% by offering these additional services. Okay, and the last example that I wanted to provide it's a government example with the state of Michigan. So the state of Michigan offers a MTO-like experience where they have a self-service driver's license renewal machine. When we started working with them in the early 2000s, they had lots of reliability problems with the machines, where the machines would break, and they'd have to service the customers that would be complaining, as well as going on manually fixing these machines. So what we did for them is we built the software application that allows them to make a transaction. So we rebuilt that transaction system. And we also provided, similar to the digital signage system, a proactive management system for all the peripherals and components and printers, barcode readers, et cetera, within the unit. And we were able to dramatically improve the reliability of the system. So the rates that we were able to get was, through the reliability of the system, they had a 20% decrease in their operational costs. They generate $5 million through this program. And unlike the MTO machines, they started with 20 units. They expanded almost 5 times, so they have over 100 units now. And if you look at, they're now getting requests from retailers to say, hey, look, I'd like to operate one of these machines because it drives so much foot traffic, and they can expand their network by partnering with retailers to run these machines instead of just having them only be run in a government facility. Okay, and the other really big difference here is that they're actually able to shut down, I think, 3 centers. So they're actually able to shut down entire offices and process and just leave a machine to help service customers in some of those areas. Okay, so I hope this sort of gives you some concrete examples in terms of what people have done with IoT. You know, if you're looking at your own company in terms of different ways of increasing revenue, adding additional revenue streams, reducing costs or increasing efficiencies, I'm hoping this will give you a couple examples. What I wanted to do next was talk a little bit about how to get started, like where these companies were, not 5 years later or 10 years later, but at the beginning when they were going through these stages. So I have, what we found is that there's typically 3 different stages that we find companies are in. One of them is what we call the ideation stage. So at this stage, companies they have an idea that, okay, maybe we can do this better, or maybe you can provide this additional service, but they don't necessarily know how to put the ideas together. So in this case, we help come up with and refine that idea. A lot of our methodology is based on a book called Digital Disruption. And it talks about trends in technology adoption, but a lot of it has to do with improving the customer experience. Now that the customer has your product or service, what's the next thing that you can do? And I'll give you a very simple example, is toothbrushes. So he worked with a simple toothbrush saying, what's the next thing you can provide? What's an additional service you can provide for a toothbrush? And what they started thinking about is, okay, well, what if you make a toothbrush smart? Initially, I'm thinking, well, why would you want, what more do you want from a toothbrush? How can you make the toothbrush smarter or provide additional services for you? So the guys at Oral-B, the idea that they came up with is, if a toothbrush was smart, it was not useful just for you to, they built a system that basically tells you how well you're brushing your teeth in different parts of your mouth. And the useful part about this wasn't so much the personal use, but if you're a parent with kids, and now you're telling your kids, rather than nagging your kids for brushing their teeth or brush an extra minute longer or something like that, they're now able to create a reward system saying, oh, you did a good job and you covered all your areas. There's also a medical link with a dentist. So, for example, if you have problems and you say, if you're looking at, I don't know, dentures or severe dental work, you'd rather buy this advanced toothbrush, right? The other interesting thing about this is that other toothbrush is 5 times more expensive than a regular toothbrush. This one's at $150 compared to $30 for a baseline product for their electric toothbrushes. And if you expand that 5 years out, they're now creating sort of the pipeline for their next generation product. So this has to do, so that's a simple example for, ideations in terms of how we come up with new ideas and how you evolve those ideas. There's the create step is the next sort of stage where somebody has an idea and they want to figure out how to build that system. So we have, a software side of it in terms of a lot of engineering work, building the software, building the hardware, building connectivity, cloud-based services, integrating that with your services. And that's sort of the next stage. And usually the proof of concept involves like a technical validation to make sure technically the product is viable and works. There's a business case validation that works, and also customer validation in terms of adoption, that the customers respond to it correctly. So we find companies that are, a group of companies sort of in that stage. And then the last stage that we have is companies that, what we call it, the deliver and scale. So these are companies where what they do is they've ran a pilot, they've had a successful program within, a test number of customers in their backyard, and then they're trying to go nationwide and expand that rollout. And what we found is the problems when you go nationwide are different. You care more about robustness, reliability of the system, other scenarios that you don't necessarily consider in a pilot that you now need to consider as you go and expand to all customers. Big data and data throughput and data volumes, those sorts of computing problems also become a concern here. So these are the types of services that we provide. And so that sort of summarizes some of our experiences with our customers. I'm hoping that this gives you some examples in terms of real-world ROI and gives you some ideas about how to get started and what are the next steps to take.